What's going on, guys? It's Coach Gaglione here. This is another edition of the Powerlifting for the People podcast. I'm your host, Coach Gaglione, and today we got an interview with the Powerlifting Chiropractor, Rob. How you doing today?
I'm doing great, bud. How are you?
Good. So we just met recently, but I just wanted to kind of have you on. Actually, just started taking your product, which we'll get into in a second. So we'll kind of see
Great.
how that goes, and we'll kind of get into that. But before we kind of get into that, can you just give the listeners a little background on like who you are, what you got going on right now, and then maybe we can kind of jump in on like how you actually got started lifting too.
Sure. So my name is Dr. Robert Bello. I have practices in northern New Jersey, Bergen County and Passaic County. Started chiropractic about 14 years ago, 13 years in my own practice. And I started a traditional type practice, and probably 10 11 years ago really started focusing more on sports, um, uh, uh, treating athletes, and really out of was another thing that was birthed out of necessity, because I was I'd always been an athlete throughout high school, 3-year varsity wrestler, so I was always in the gym. And probably about 11 years ago, I started CrossFit, and that was really what stoked my fire for fitness. Um, and Still love it, still take care of a lot of gyms. I've got my L1 certification, was teaching over at a bunch of gyms, specifically mobility, stability work. I was seeing a lot of issues with athletes with a lack of those. So we really started to focus on that, getting a lot of athletes in, doing all the soft tissue work included with the adjustments, like the cupping, the Graston work. Was doing a lot of dry needling, a lot of therapeutic exercises. So really, that's kind of and of course, through that, I was experiencing my own injuries. So what was working best for me as far as getting treatment is what I wanted to offer my patients. So that's kind of what has brought me today to kind of where I am. I'd probably say 60% of my patients are athletes, whether they're weekend warriors, high school, collegiate athletes, some high level elite athletes as well. So that's just been my bread and butter. I love dealing with athletes. They really do a great job of being compliant, sometimes overly compliant, right? But they're already doing a protocol, whether in the gym, and they can easily add in whatever I, prescribe for them to kind of help out their situation. So it's just a lot of fun for me.
Awesome. So specifically, I guess again, I don't know if this is your experience or not, but I know, like, I'm assuming you got into CrossFit first, and then
Mhm.
at what point did you maybe transition a little bit more into like strength training? And then I know you said you did some competitions as well in powerlifting. So
Yeah,
how did
yeah.
that
So
like
yeah,
kind of come
within
about?
even within CrossFit, I was always a big fan of the heavy lifts. Um, I probably lasted full time in CrossFit for like 2 years. Had tore both labrums. I went from certified dad bod to losing 30 pounds and then putting back on 30 pounds of muscle, and really started wanting to get into powerlifting full time. So 2015 pretty much started powerlifting. And that was when I was turning 40. So I wanted to, hit my 405-pound deadlift, heavy squat, and from then on, it's been history. I've been primarily powerlifting. Love it. My body responds much better to it. Nice heavy set with a nice long break in between. And Yeah, I started doing some competitions. I've done a handful of competitions, RPS and USPA. As a master's athlete, I hold a couple of the state records for, squat, deadlift in both federations. And I love it. For me, competition, competition is tough. I always seem to get nicked up and injured on the process there. So really, my passion is training. So I really focus uh, on my training consistently because obviously with my work it's very physical. So I just don't get a break. So it's really I train RPE how I feel that day with a family, busy practice. If I'm well recovered, we'll push it that day. If I'm not, we pull back, work on volume techniques. So I found like a really great groove and kind of where my training is at right now. And I'll do a fun kind of charity fundraiser competition here and there. Just but not my focus, right?
Yeah, I think there's a couple of things I wanted to highlight, and then obviously being a chiropractor or someone that has like you have a different kind of understanding of the body, injuries, and things like that. So I know you went from something like CrossFit, which is a little bit more broad. I would say a little bit more chaotic, higher reps, things like that, less controlled. And that's like one of the things that I've tried it all too. I've done kettlebells, and I've done some
Sure.
CrossFit myself. Only like a 2 month stint. I didn't last that long, but I've done some strongman. I did a bodybuilding show, so I like to I've tried everything. The only
Sure.
thing I've never actually competed in terms of strength sports would be like Highland Games and like weightlifting, but I've done some seminars. Then obviously CrossFit has like a lot of weightlifting movements, but
Sure.
I've always kind of gravitated back towards powerlifting. And
Yep.
I've been competing since 2006. So just kind of in your opinion, and it sounds like, regardless of competing or not, I think that's great. I think for a lot of people, I think finding a modality of training that's sustainable, I think is so
Sure.
important. So like, what would you say are some of the reasons why you think that maybe that the basic barbell lifts have been like kind of good for someone who's a master's athlete, someone that's a family man who's busy? Why do you think that's worked so well for you?
Well, I think something like CrossFit, it's what's its strength is also kind of what its weakness is that it challenges every different type of lift and every different type of energy system, and it forces you to become a more well-rounded athlete. um, there's always a joke, it's like you become like average at everything. And and that has certainly has its advantages and disadvantages. For certain types of body type, swinging from the rig, doing gymnastics movements is rough on their body, and that kind of was the case for me. And then I found myself with these kind of injuries and having to modify all the workouts. So I really just seemed to, if I really focused my energy towards these big lifts, the squat, deadlift, bench, that I could lock in my form. I could also get proper rest period between sets, and re-energize, and I could warm up properly, and I can really focus on my accessory movements. So for me, and I think for a lot of people, I think the different modalities work. I had work better with their body type and their I think what they're genetically, and it's nice to excel at something, to
Yes.
you know uh you know when I would see a movement come up in CrossFit, and it was just like, I'm just going to get dogged on this one. It's it is what it is, but it's not the greatest feeling. I like to kind of go in. I have a limited amount of time between family and work, so I want to kind of get the most out of it. And for me particularly, it's definitely powerlifting.
Awesome. Yeah, I think it's really important that like it interests you, it kind of fits with your lifestyle.
Yep.
Obviously, it kind of fits with you like kind of orthopedically. And I think, I'm a little biased. Obviously, you have your opinions on it too, but I think when it comes to like, some sort of squat, some sort of press, some sort of pull or hip hinge, deadlift, I think there's some variation, some range of motion, which almost like anyone could do. And I think that's not the case for, some other sports. And certainly, when you get to like something like a CrossFit where maybe you have to like be able to like be well versed in gymnastics and overhead like weightlifting and kettlebells and dumbbells and running and swimming, and it can be kind of very daunting. So just having to focus on 1 to 3 lifts and maybe even doing a single lift meet. Like I'm
Sure.
actually getting ready for like a strict curl competition for the first time, which I'm kind of excited for. So that's like my next venture.
Very cool.
Real exciting stuff. So I think that it's definitely kind of worth considering. And I think that I'm not sure like what your training schedule is like, but I have some masters athletes that might only train a couple of times a week for like an hour, and you can kind of still make progress and still get it done.
Exactly.
Especially if you're like economical with your time and have a good plan. So
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
know
I
you
mean, when we just had we have a 2-year-old son, so we just had a baby 2 years ago. So it was even tighter schedule. But, if I could get in that 2 days a week, and really push it, I was able to sustain.
that's awesome.
And now things have opened up, and I'm in there, 3, 4 times a week. And now I'm actually, I'm still hitting PRs.
That's amazing.
And that's, yeah, that's, and again, it certainly helps me in my work, having to be very physical all day. Um, so it's definitely better for my lifestyle. Um, and I help coach people through, their different chosen sports, and as far as injury prevention and getting them back to play. So everybody's got a different fire in their belly. So we're here to try to kind of help everybody get back to their passion.
Awesome. So one of the things actually that I thought was really interesting. Oh man, I wish I had my. Let me see if I can actually pull up the exact quote. So this will be kind of pertinent for like today's topic. But one of the keynote speakers at Strong New York had this great quote, and he said, "Let's see, we are best suited to help the person you once were." So you had a lot of injuries. Now you're kind of helping
Sure.
people kind of get out of injuries. So I thought that was like very kind
Oh,
of
and that's, I mean, that's hits it right on the head. I mean, when I started chiropractic, um, I got into chiropractic because of a gym injury, but then as I progressed through chiropractic school, I mean, I literally didn't have any pain or injuries, and there was a kind of a lack of wisdom when dealing with people that have these injuries, and have to talk to somebody about a rotator cuff injury, and I've never had one before. So now I can say a couple of things to somebody, and they look, exactly what I'm talking about. So uh, it's double-edged sword. It's not great to be injured, but to kind of push yourself to the point, and you're having some tissue disruption. But to have that experience, and you've gone through the healing process, it helps people to, guiding people's expectations is huge. And when you come from a place of experience, it's just very valuable.
So I know you mentioned like using RPE as a tool, rating your training intensity as like a way to kind of regulate your training now. But obviously, even with the best program, sometimes we still get dings, right? You mentioned that a lot of times you're getting ready for a meet, you're trying to,
Sure.
even, and like we all have the best intentions. Sometimes the hardest person to coach is yourself, right? So
Of course.
in the event of an injury, so obviously you kind of talked about helping the CrossFitters with maybe some movement, some mobility kind of things. You mentioned obviously your chiropractic adjustments, some cupping. I think you mentioned Graston and some other kind of scraping type
Yeah.
things.
Yeah.
So there's so many modalities and kind of things. So obviously it sounds like you have like a multi-prong approach
Sure.
to treating some of these injuries. So for someone that maybe they're kind of dealing with something that's more chronic, maybe someone, God for, it happens, maybe they tore something or partially tore something, whether it be a muscle issue or, or coming back from like surgery or something. And I know it's like a lot to kind of cover. So maybe you could just maybe like, what's, I guess, the first step in kind of maybe like, someone kind of comes to you for advice. What are some things that maybe you're kind of assessing, or what kind of conversations are you having with the athlete to kind of get them started?
Sure. Well, first and foremost, we assess for proper stability, and we check to see is this presenting like a full thickness tear of some sort, where we would probably send out for an MRI right away. Once we kind of see, okay, it's something less severe than that, then we'll get into just checking range of motion, checking different movements that would indicate, and some orthopedic testing to indicate what muscle, what tissue seems to be the pain generator. Once I get into that, my foundation would be a chiropractic adjustment. If, your thoracic spine is locked up, your shoulders aren't going to move right from there. Um, so from there, I usually will start off with just some ART, right? Pin and stretch. I'll get into the muscle, we'll move it, see how sometimes that's excruciatingly painful, and that's all we'll do. So I like to reduce the amount of variables of treatment, and see what works, because what cupping may work with somebody,
Sure.
ART may work with somebody else. So once I can add that variable and add that input in, see how they respond, we'll either stick with that, we'll change it, we'll add something.
Just I want to, and you can obviously keep going from there.
Right.
So in terms of like the active release technique, which I've had some pretty good success with, excuse me, myself. Actually, I'm not sure if you're familiar with the name, but like Derlin Castro, I know he worked on my hamstring. I tore my hamstring my senior year in football, so that was like my first exposure to some ART. And
Yeah.
I remember it was kind of painful. Again, this is like I was like 17 years old or something at the time, but it did really help kind of get me back on the field. I was able to kind of finish out my senior year. I wrestled as well. That was my main sport, so we have that in common. So like I know like what's tough for me sometimes too, because obviously we all have different like pain tolerances, and like my
Sure.
like P and like my like perceived like pain could be different, and that's a whole like kind of can of worms, and the pain science and all that. And but if someone's kind of getting some sort of like, I guess, tissue work, whether it be ART, Graston, scraping, this, cupping, all these things, um, are there some things that like are kind of like, okay, we're gonna stop. This is like we're
Oh,
too
sure.
high on the pain scales. When you're working with an athlete, what should they be feeling when they're kind of getting some of this body work done?
I
Or
mean,
not?
yeah, I mean, it's well known. I always warn people that, what we do is not comfortable, right? When you have a tissue irritation or disruption, and first and foremost, like I said, I assess it to make sure it doesn't seem like it's too far gone where we'd have to really get an MRI before we touched it. So once I can assess that, then I feel more comfortable to get in there and create some discomfort. Um, Again, it just like you said, everybody's got a very different pain tolerance. Some people are screaming before I touch them, and some people are stoic and don't say a word, and then afterwards are like, "That was terrible." I was like, "You got to give me some feedback here, right?" Um, so, so I do base the level of treatment and how deep I get with my soft tissue modalities based off of their reaction. I tell them to be vocal with me, don't hide it. So I don't want to, cripple them. I want to give them as much as they can kind of handle and not be sore for a week afterwards. So yeah, be ready for it to be uncomfortable. I tell people one of the most difficult parts of my job is that we have an area of injury, and I have to get into that area to create change, to begin the healing process, because what we often see is the body's defense mechanism, the reaction of the body is to lock everything up, tighten the area, which reduces your range of motion. And that is an intelligent response of the body for the short term, right? Long term, it is going to cause other compensations. It's not going to allow enough blood flow or allow enough movement to assist the healing. So I have to start to unpeel all of this, body's compensation, and expose something. And it often is more painful when you leave at first. But when they come back the second time, the third time, and you're like, this is like, it's so much better. Like, so, you know, because, you know, at this point in my practice, I'm 100% referral. We don't do any advertisement. So they've gotten, their cousin, their friend, their gym member, has recommended me. So there is a level of trust there. And hopefully sometimes they'll warn them that it's not comfortable. And, but there is a light at the end of the tunnel.
So next kind of question with that, whether it be an adjustment or, you know, some of this ART technique, soft tissue work. Obviously you kind of mentioned that athletes can be compliant or maybe too compliant. So for somebody, I know like myself, I'm sure it's same thing for you, you know, we look forward to the gym, right? So if they're getting this treatment done, obviously depending on the injury and stuff, I know this is all like, you know, depends on the person and the situation. Some people may want to like get right back to training right away. So like if you are say like working on someone's, you know, maybe you're adjusting their back, maybe you're doing some ART on like some of the shoulder region, but they have a squat workout coming up or they have a bench workout coming up. Like, what do you kind of tell them in terms of like, because obviously you're creating some inflammation, there's going to be a stimulus there. So what do you kind of tell them in terms of like kind of, you know, if you're going to schedule treatments, what's kind of the turnaround time where they should be kind of training again, you know, just on average? I know it kind of depends on the situation and, you know, the person.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it definitely is. It's a case by case situation. Um, I as much I am, and that's one of the reasons that people do are referred to me is because I generally don't tell you. You know, I'm not the guy who's going to tell you, well, don't ever deadlift again. That doesn't happen here. We use deadlift as medicine to get that back stronger to protect you from further injuries. But there is sometimes, um, if it's really bad, I will to say, listen, we need to lay off it for a week. Let's get some treatment in. Most of the time, we'll start to, you know, modify. We'll start with the hip hinge. If the hip hinge feels okay, you know, we'll work on that a little bit, and then we'll piece it all back together. Sometimes they can, you know, they can. I'll treat them if they're and go after it. I implore my patients to be their own best coach and listen to their body, right? That's the key is that, and, you know, because they're like, oh, well, I have a torn labrum. What can I do? I said, well, try to do a movement very lightly, under very little load. And if it doesn't feel good, then don't do it. You know, my right labrum tear, gets flared up if I overhead press. My left labrum tear gets irritated when I do some sort of pull-up movement. So each, you know, nuanced injury is going to affect different movements differently. So I will tell them, I said, listen, you have to start to really take a self inventory of these movements, how they feel when you're doing them, but often how you feel the next day, because a tendonitis type issue, sometimes you can get through the movement, you feel good, and then next day you feel like trash. And once you get people to do, people know, and you know you can't. I'm like, just don't. If you're not honest with yourself, you're going to cause more. So there is that trust issue. It's easier, and that's why so many doctors will say just don't do it because it's easier. Just like don't. It's just like, hey, just take this pill, right, for your blood pressure, because it's much easier than tell them
Yeah.
lose weight and start running and, you know, cardiovascular work. So there is a lot of trust that goes on there. But I am aggressive about getting people to start moving again. And definitely even just like under just a little bit of load. It's, you know, I especially at first, if or, you know, it's not an exact science. So I just say, listen, even like sometimes the scariest thing is when they feel too good too soon, and then they push it too hard. So I just say, even if you're feeling great, keep it at 80%. Just don't, because if you have tissues that are healing, right, and pain is starting to go away, but it's not a strong union there. You haven't laid down enough soft tissue. Boom. I did that with my VMO. Thought it felt great. Push it too hard. Boom. Ripped it open, a muscle belly tear, you know, 2 or 3 times as bad as it was before. So these are, again, my own lessons that I am able to impart some wisdom to my patients with.
Yeah, a couple of things I want to just rephrase and say again for the listeners. I think, you kind of mentioned it, like the word assessment a few times. We talked about, weighting of perceived exertion. So always be kind of paying attention to like how you feel. I think that's really important as you go through training, whether you're injured or not, just kind of pay it. Because I think sometimes we're just kind of going through the motions and we're very busy. We're just trying to get the work done. Um, but yeah, just kind of notice like, and you don't need to be like kind of like, I think there's some people that are like too extreme one way or the other. There's people that don't pay attention at all. People that are like kind of, they're like looking for the pain and they're like kind of almost sabotaging themselves. So, but just be aware of your body. Does this feel normal? Does this feel sketchy? I haven't really felt that before.
Well,
Um,
and to just to add on to that, that's what was my issue with preparing for competitions, is that I had work that I had to do, and regardless of how my body felt, and then my schedule would change, and then I would say, oh well, I don't have this, I can't do this rest day, I need to do my other lift this day instead of taking that day, and those little things really threw me off. So that's why it's like I don't have any schedule of anywhere. If I feel great, I'm going to push it and keep on pushing it. And if I don't, I'm going to pull back and be safe, but I'm going to still get work done.
Awesome. So I know we kind of alluded to maybe just taking a pill. So maybe that's a good segue for the next thing.
Sure.
So obviously, like, anything we say is just, not like straight medical advice. So a couple of, I'm just going to kind of throw out. So there's a couple I'm in Delaware now. We also have the original locations in New York. So there's actually a clinic that we have kind of contacts with. There's Life Med, and then Coastal MD. So they have a lot of these peptides and hormone therapies and stuff. So I know one of the things we met at New York Strong, Strong New York, excuse me. And you had this oral BPC 157, which I thought was very interesting, which we'll kind of talk about. So, and we had this conversation, but I just want to kind of, just recap for the listeners. So for those that have been following my journey, and I just competed in September, around the end of July, I kind of like retore something in my shoulder. This is the one I dislocated back in 2011. It flares up every now and then, but this was like pretty bad, where to the point where there was a little bit of bleeding, and I wasn't sure if I was going to have to pull out of the meet. So this was like early summer, and I had a meet scheduled for September, but I also have a very busy life. I'm getting married next year, all this stuff. I'm not sure like if and when I'm going to do another full meet for a long time. So I'm like, I'm on this time crunch. I really want to try to make this happen. I wasn't sure so I just like kind of didn't do anything that kind of aggravated the injury. Did a little research, started doing some BPC 157. It worked really good. I was able to get through the prep by the skin of my teeth. Had a great meet, but now I kind of ended up compensating from my hurt shoulder, and I've been having some issues on the opposite side, which sometimes can happen. You start to compensate, and then we kind of started chatting about it. So some of these peptides, I think it's kind of like a buzzword. There's a lot of information on like what they can do, what they are. So the first thing I'll just say is like, if you could maybe just give maybe a layman's description of like what a peptide is and what some of these things do, what kind of healing properties. So I know we kind of mentioned one of them, but like what is a peptide? What is your experience with them? And then what should be people like looking out for if they're kind of interested and maybe,
Sure.
looking into some of this stuff?
Yeah. So peptides is just a very generic name for a chain of amino acids. And they range in function dramatically. So those who have heard about peptides generally think of something that's anabolic, like something that's going to stimulate testosterone or growth hormone. That's one. Those are one couple types of anabolic type peptides, but insulin is a peptide, right? The big semaglutide, that is a peptide. These are things that have nothing to do with being anabolic. And BPC 157, TB 500, again, these are 100% recovery type peptides, nothing to do with being anabolic. So, I have people that, like, am I on steroids? Like, no, this is totally different action. So, these, so like a BPC 157 is a synthetic version of a peptide that we naturally create in our gut. And that is created in our gut to help protect and help to heal the gut from the acidic environment and all the damage that happens there. It is helping that locally, but it is generally a systemic flowing peptide. So it helps to recover our tendons and ligaments and bones throughout our body. Just like many other things in our body, we make a lot of it when we're younger, and we make much less of it when we're older. So they have created this synthetic version and using it as a supplement. And it's all about recovery, right? Some people nickname it the Wolverine, compound. It is basically very potent anti-inflammatory. For the healing aspect of it, it creates angiogenesis, which is creation of more blood vessels. It stimulates more fibroblast production, which produces more collagen. And then it also has a very strong effect on it upregulates your growth hormone receptors. Right? So it doesn't actually create more growth hormone, but it creates your ability to use your own natural growth hormone more efficiently. So, with growth hormone effects, we see people that have better recovery. The recovery between workouts is wild. And sleeping better. We've seen some type 1 diabetics have insulin sensitivity increase. So there's just been and the thing about, you start to hear all the things that it can do, and it seems too good to be true, because it's like this, as a chiropractor, I've never been into the concept of a magic pill, right? Where you're trying to do the work and do, to change. But I mean, this is as close to it as possible, because if you think about, I've done a lot of advanced nutritional work with autoimmune conditions, and it's all based off of inflammation, and that inflammation can attack your thyroid, can attack someone else's joints, can attack someone else's pancreas. So wherever the inflammation is attacking your body, it can see change with it. I've had people who have didn't even realize that they were not, thinking as clearly as they possibly could, and they start taking it, and they're like, my thought process is so much clearer. It's just dramatic. So not, I usually focus on it's anti-inflammatory, helps ligaments, bones, and tendons heal, and then all the other stuff. And then I've really been seeing a lot of very consistent growth with the growth hormone. I've had people that start losing weight, and it's not like a dramatic amount of weight, but it's that they know they have that number they haven't been able to dip below, and
Right.
suddenly they haven't changed anything, and they're 3 or 4 pounds below that. It's not like they're losing 30 or 40 pounds, but that growth hormone is able to burn body fat while holding on to lean muscles. So it's been a wild ride.
Yeah, well, a couple of things I want to touch on, because I think sometimes we're like, oh, it's just for recovery, but like if your sleep is better, you're more recovered, you're less inflamed, your workout's going to be better in the gym, you're going to be more like rested, you can make smarter food choices. So like all this is like a synergistic effect where
100%.
maybe it's not burning fat per se, but it's going to allow you to be, in a state where you could actually function like optimally, which is huge. So my question for you is like, this sounds great, obviously. I know, I have experience with kind of the injectable version. So what's the difference between like the oral version and the injectable version? And then, kind of once we kind of go through that, like, is this like for everybody? Is there certain people that shouldn't take it? Is some people that should be cautious with it? Like, what are maybe some of that? Because obviously there's, pros and cons to like anything. So
Of course. So I have had my introduction to BPC 157 was injectable. Powerlifting, a little bro science in the gyms, and it was magical. It was one of those things. Once you had a tweak, you had a tear, you used it, you saw the results. It's something that you had in your fridge at all times. Yeah, you can use it for a couple of weeks. You bet. So I, just like most people out there that have had the experience with the injectable, I was skeptical of the pills. And you know what? you hear people say, "Oh, the pills are garbage," and you know what? They're absolutely correct about 2 years ago, because what they did is the injectable version is BPC 157 acetate, and people were doing so well with the injectable, they said, okay, let's just put this in a pill and give it to people. Well, that did not survive the digestive process and was about 3% bioavailable, so it was garbage. About 2 years ago, someone has pioneered a new formulation of it where it is using a different ester, and it is now BPC 157 arginate. And that arginate salt is able to pass through the digestive system and now become 90 to 98% bioavailable. So once and again, when we started to produce the formulation, uh, I tried it, and honestly, it's like indistinguishable from the injectable. So you'll read a lot of people will say, "Well, I hear the with the I'm sorry, I didn't even mention before gut health. Gut health is this is something that was created in the gut." And that's one of the biggest things we see, especially. And if you know about the gut, and there's a gut brain axis and how the gut a lot of people focus on the gut to rule the body as far as the immune response. And so once you start to heal the gut, you see it all over the body. So, but in general, in the literature, you'll hear, oh well, the pills work, but they're more for gut health, and the injectable is more for tendon and ligament health. And one of the things that they will cite is that you can do site injections, so right in the area, and there's very little evidence to show that there is an increased localized effect. I'm sure there is, but the majority of it um, is a systemic effect. And this happens often. You have your one problem area that you're trying to focus on, even with the injectable, and you're using it in that area, and then something across the body is getting better as well. So there is so for in our experience, there's a huge systemic effect that that the pill hits. And what with our product, which is very different than most things you find out there, is that it is 100% domestically synthesized, manufactured from start to finish. Just like most of the pharmaceutical drugs, most of the compounds out there are synthesized in China or India, and there's a litany of health and safety concerns with that. So we are super proud that we're able to have a domestically derived product. And and of course, like with anything else, it comes with a cost. I mean, I have connections to get a BPC, the same type of product from overseas, and it's a fraction of the cost. So ours isn't the most expensive, but it's not the cheapest. And when you're putting something like that in your body, you certainly don't want to focus on you get what you pay for. But as you were saying, it is something that so many populations can do well on. As far as downsides, there are no real toxicity issues. When you talk about pills, people think about liver and kidney and heart. There are no toxicity issues. Very, very tolerable. The one thing that we have seen for people that have blood pressure issues, some people that are very cortisol driven, it can give them a little increased blood pressure, increased feelings of almost anxiety, dizziness. I mean, I warn people about that, but it's literally been, a handful of patients in hundreds of clients. I mean, and those, and that's that kind of what is brought me to the point where I refuse to put it online and sell it anonymously, because as a clinician, I want to know who I'm dealing with, what your history is, what sort of confounding factors that may have me start, because I like to tweak the dosing. So if I know you have blood pressure issues, I'm going to start you off at a half the dose. If you just buy the pills online and you follow the general, you may take a couple of pills, have anxiety, and throw the bottle away and say this is garbage. So we really want to, everybody, I sell only through my Instagram account, Powerlifting Chiropractor. And you DM me, I'll take you through everything. And then we'll give you the proper dosing. And I urge you to contact me every week, see how you're doing. And then in addition to that, depending on your progress, I'll also recommend, hey, are you seeing a body worker, chiropractor, physical therapist? What are you doing rehab wise? Because it all works synergistically together. So then I'll even locate local providers that have say, hey, listen, I know a guy in Fort Worth. He's the best. Go to this guy, along with the peptide therapy. So, but as well, again, with blood pressure, I've seen people that are on blood pressure meds that their primaries have lowered their blood pressure meds because their blood pressure has gone down. So the response is so different relative to body weight, how you metabolize things. Do you have methylation issues? So, when I get that information from them, I'm able to give them recommendations, or sometimes say, you know what, we may want to stay away from this. I had somebody last night contact me and was really interested in his wife starting with it, but they're thinking about having a baby. And I don't know what I don't know, but I know to be safe and say, you know what, probably not the best time to start it. So, I try to err on the side of being conservative, but at the same time, I've seen so many populations do really well.
Is there any like type of injury that it works like better for, or like, is there like, if something is like, a tendon rupture or like a full blown muscle tear, like, are there certain cases where like it's kind of too far gone? It's not like,
Yeah. So
no.
we've helped people through. So I get a lot of people that have an injury and they want to avoid a surgery. So we get them started. Sometimes I've had numerous surgeries canceled straight up. Carpal tunnel, plantar fascial plate surgery, meniscus, but these are depending on the severity, right? If you have a full thickness tear, I tell people we nickname it the magic pill. It does wonders, but it's not, it's not gonna heal some of those things. So when those people then have to have surgery, then we start them on afterwards, and their healing time is a fraction of the time. So often we will, again, I'll help counsel them through, like if it sounds like something we need to get an MRI, I may tell them get an MRI before they start. So I try to help. I really like to try to manage expectations, right? Because we want to have as many successful cases as possible. I'm not just gonna have somebody that has their arm hanging off by a string and say, hey, take the BPC, it's gonna fix it. Because you know what, that doesn't do anybody any good. So people really like honesty and transparency. And but as far as your everyday joint aches and pains from working the gym hard for years, always do great. We have a lot of uh, I have a lot of gut issues. Fantastic. The post-operative stuff has been great. I have PTs that are sending me their post-op patients, and and it's great because it's not just someone telling me, "Hey, I feel better." It's a medical professional saying, "You know what? He is like so far ahead of the curve as far as healing." So but yeah, but small belly tears that are going to heal. If even small tendon tears that are partial tears, not we see do very well.
Very cool. I think kind of touched on everything I wanted to, and I want to respect your time, and we're getting like close to an hour. So a couple of kind of takeaways, I think, like number one, you got to be like assessing, not guessing. Like, so like work with a professional, retest, analyze your movement. Another thing I wanted to kind of, touch on really quick. I know I'm not sure if you're familiar with Kelly Starrett and some of his work, kind
Of
of
course.
also
Yeah.
community, but he always talks about like looking like not just at the injury, but like up and downstream. And I think that's a really good thing when you're
100% how
maybe
I handle it.
trying to figure out injuries. So, I think that multi-prong approach where you're looking at your movement, you may be addressing the soft tissue as well as kind of diet and supplementation. It's a holistic kind of approach. It's not just like one thing. You kind of talked about using the synergy of like everything. So pay attention to your sleep, pay attention to your diet, your stress, your training. It's not just any one thing, and communicating with a professional about like the dosage, these things, especially when you start to kind of get into peptides and stuff, you want to make sure you're sourcing it properly. Working with someone like yourself, I kind of mentioned we have Life Med in Delaware in the kind of the Maryland area. And then in Long Island, we like Coastal MD. So just working with an actual provider and a professional, I think is really important. You don't want to just get this from like an underground lab somewhere and just kind of like, you don't know what you're getting. Because as this stuff gets more popular, like you said, some of it's like kind of gym bro stuff. You don't really know where it's sourced from. So you want to make sure what you're putting in your body is like a good product. So I don't know if you want to add to any of that, but.
Yes. So we're we're kind of encroaching upon interesting times where the FDA is attempting to come down on the peptide market, and every day is a little murky. But what it seems like the way their approach is, they are coming down on seemingly the injectable market, and it's a strange thing because they're coming down on a market that is the highest quality out there. You have to go to a facility, go to an MD, get a referral, get a prescription, have a compounding facility that is under all the safety concerns, and then get that filled out. And those are the ones that are going to be affected the most. And so now you're going to have all these people that have been used to being on these peptides without supply and probably turning to the black market. So exactly what you were saying, there is a lot of garbage out there. And, we had a little bit of a lapse between our manufacturers, and I had a lot of patients that had tried to order pills online and had bad experiences. So the fact that, I spoke to a lot of functional medicine clinics over at Strong NYC, and other clinics that had been using peptide therapy, and they understand the difference between us being able to say we had the domestically synthesized product. So they were excited to be able to transition their patients to something that we had. So the takeaway from that is just don't believe what you read online. It's if you're ordering from a lot of these sites, they are there's a quality issue, sometimes quantity issue. If it says there's 5 milligrams in a jar, it might be only 2 milligrams. It's not highly regulated, and we take our products from the start to finish. It's twice third party tested, so we got the goods. So don't try to save $20 because you'll pay later.
Well, I appreciate your time. I know if you want to just mention your Instagram one more time, I don't know if you have a website or anything else, but anything that you want to plug, or how can people contact you if they want to, get more information?
That. Yeah, I just have everybody funneled to at Powerlifting Chiropractor. I will, I accept follows, and please reach out to me in my DM. That's the best way to contact me. We've been shipping all over the world now, and it's exciting times. So, any questions you have, please reach out. And thanks again for having me on this. We love talking about fitness and lifestyle, and we love spreading the good word. So.
Yeah, I think what I've been trying to do and what Powerlifting for the People is all about is just like kind of showing that, this is a scalable thing. It's something that really anyone can do, but you just have to have certain have your health in mind, have longevity in mind. You don't need to just trash your body. You can still compete in the sport. You can still get stronger, get all the benefits, and stay in one piece. So having people like you on is always great, because I want to kind of showcase not just the performance side of things, but also having the health in mind. And I think that's, so critical. So, please give Rob a follow. If you guys enjoyed the podcast, please give it a 5-star review. It helps other people find us. Thank you guys so much for listening. Until next time, stay strong, and we'll see you soon.